I told y'all some of the stuff we've been talking about that the Lord had given me. One of the scriptures we were supposed to go through was James 5. And I didn't understand because it's been 3 weeks. And every service, it's like we don't get to James 5. Well, now I know why. Because this morning, if you've got your Bibles, we're going to start, and I'll be in the New Living Translation, whatever translation you're in. So the Lord speaks to me this morning, and He said, Matthew 26:6. And so I opened up to that, and we start reading. And it says, Meanwhile, Jesus was in Bethany at the home of Simon, depending on how yours reads. Now I want you to catch something. Jesus was in Bethany at the home of Simon, a man who had previously had leprosy. Do you see that? Previously had leprosy. So this was a leper. And in some translations, it doesn't even say Simon. It just says home at the leper, or the one who had previously had leprosy. Okay? Well, first of all, if you catch that, which obviously when the Lord's sitting there showing me something, I don't have to catch it. He's pointing it out. So obviously, Jesus is with Simon, who he had healed of leprosy. Okay? Because if you know anything about the day, that lepers were kept out. They were outcasts. You didn't associate with them. They were, and y'all know we've got my pastor friend, which we've been talking some this week over in Guyana. He was a leper, and he shared how, just like in the biblical days, they over in Guyana they treated him that way. He couldn't come into the village, nothing. And then God healed him. But so we see here that Jesus is at the home of Simon, who was previously a leper, and it says while he was eating, so he was eating with Simon, a woman came in, depending on the translation you're reading. It says a woman came in, and we know this story, with a beautiful alabaster jar of expensive perfume and poured it over his head. Now we know this story. I know this story. And so when I'm reading this, it's like, yeah. And then we see in verse 8, it says that the disciples were indignant when they saw this. And they said, what a waste. It could have been sold for a high price and the money given to the poor. Do you see that? But listen to what Jesus says. It says, but Jesus, aware of this, replied, why criticize this woman for doing such a good thing to me? He said, you will always have the poor among you, but you will not always have me. You will not always have me. She has poured this perfume on me to prepare my body for burial. I tell you the truth, wherever the good news is preached throughout this world, this woman's deed will be remembered and discussed. That was kind of significant to me, but I'm still like, yeah, Lord, I know the story. The next scripture, the next sentence, then Judas Iscariot, one of the 12 disciples, went to the leading priest and asked, how much will you pay me to betray Jesus to you? And they gave him 30 pieces of silver. From that time on, Judas began looking for an opportunity to betray Jesus. So I've read all this. But here's where, y'all know in March, right when the pandemic was hitting, the Lord had spoke. This goes back actually 2 years to 2018 because, again, down here on the floor a minute ago, you got to understand, it's like I said Thursday night, a lot of times God speaks something, it's so deep. And some of you that's been in the water well or oil drilling business, it's like he just keeps drilling down. And one of the things God keeps reminding me of is in 2018 at the Voice of Healing Conference, when he told me to get on my face before him, and he said I had to blind Paul so he could see and learn to follow me. I had asked my family, I'd sent this morning, and I pray some of them are watching. If not, guys, I'm just the messenger. I can't. What I'm fixing to say is hard, because this is where God's taking me this morning. So we see that Jesus is in the home of the leper that he healed, and we also see what was about to take place, that he was about to be betrayed into the hands to be crucified. This was a very dark time in the history of the world. And so here's what God said to me and showed me in this. Many of you, listen, 6 months ago, God shut this planet down of the idols. Much like the days of Jesus, you remember that he talks about in these last days that people are going to be going around and going on with their lives, eating and drinking, everyday life, marrying and being given in marriage. 6 months ago, sports was everybody's God. Many, many things around this world, pretty much everything but God was people's gods. And just like he did in 2011, when they flew the planes, the world stopped and took notice. And the church, for a very short, brief period of time, started coming back together. But this time, he shut the world down. You see, this pandemic has not been about the United States, and that's where we're missing it. All these boat parades, if y'all notice something, go back on my Facebook page and see how much you see me talk about Trump. Because I understand one thing. Said it all along. Trump is a pawn. But here's what I will tell you this morning. Just like when the Lord gave me that message right before this about when he spoke it to me and they started closing the churches, was going, we didn't. Tell me what to do. But here's the message to the world today. We're facing the same scenario we got right here. We are at the point just prior to Jesus being betrayed. I heard it last night. I've been hearing it for months and weeks. Well, when things go back to normal, they are not going back to normal, folks. What saddens me, even when we went to South Dakota, is the people, and especially the Christians, who are already going right back to what they think's normal. But right here, I kept asking the Lord, what is the significance of what? And some of the translations talk about being Mary Magdalene, But what's the significance of the woman pouring the perfume over his head? And if you take notice, the disciples didn't recognize it. His own disciples who had been with him did not recognize what was about to happen. They didn't recognize when Jesus gave them parables and told them that he was going to die and be raised 3 days later. They didn't have a clue even when he told them. But as he's pointed out here, what she did would be told all around the world. This oil, this perfume that she poured over him would be spoken of for years to come. And he says that she was preparing. She had poured this perfume on me to prepare my body for burial. So you see that in this time, she pours this perfume over his body to prepare Jesus for what was about to come, which was the darkest day, the darkest time in the world's history. Can I tell you why this has been pretty tough this morning? Is what God was showing me is we're in the same time. But this time, Jesus he's the dark hour that he's speaking of. Is we're in the same time that he has shut down the idols. He's shut the world. He's taken everything so people would have a chance to focus on him, and they would have a chance and would look and would turn to Christ. One last chance. But the sad part is how many, all they're worried about is going back to their job, going back to their work, going back to life as usual. I sat there this morning and I thought about some of you. I thought about Damon in the last year. I thought about Bart. What is it that you're still making your God and you're refusing to turn and just rest and just say, you know what? My job's not important. My career's not important. Nothing else is important but Jesus Christ and my relationship with him. And then everything else comes behind this. But let me tell you something. The thing that comes behind that is he shut everything down so you would also draw close to your family. He's given this world one more opportunity to get it right. Christ first, family second. But so many are not hearing it. So many's not recognizing it. I hear every day people talking about well, when this thing lifts up, man, I got, money, 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 money. We ain't even got to James 5 yet. Now it all makes sense. He's taken our gods away, and we're too busy trying to grab them and pull them back. But here's the thing. For those of you that are watching, and for those of you that are listening, I don't care, son, if it's your motorcycle. I don't care what it is. Anything you're making and putting in place of Christ, you're going to burn. The day is here. We're not going back to a business as usual. This planet is fixed to taste the darkest hour in its history since Christ's crucifixion. Because when? You see, what I believe is that it's all being prepared, just like she was preparing Jesus' body to go through the crucifixion, that it's all being prepared for Jesus to come back and yank his church up out of here. And when that happens, see, I don't care where you are with the rapture. pre-rapture, post-rapture. It ain't post. I can tell you that. And any of you that believe it's post, you better get back in that word and you better get before the Father. Because when he takes the church out of here, the only pushback to all this evilness that's going on, and when he takes it out of here, this world is going to be a dark place, darker than anything you can imagine. If you think it's bad right now, think about this world with no police, with no pushback of the evil. I read something this morning about from the firefighters. The looting and what they're doing, and he said they're destroying. And he said, y'all don't have any idea these fire trucks, $400,000. And he said, it's your taxpayer money. Your taxpayer money that they're destroying. What are you going to do when all the police force is defunded, the fire's defunded? Folks, you don't even understand. What are you going to do when Jesus Christ says, you know what? Enough. And he comes and he pulls the church out of here. That's the hour we're facing right now. But yet all I keep hearing, some of you have lost loved ones here recently. Many I've talked to over the last several weeks and calls I've gotten of family members being sick and all kinds of things. Folks, let me tell you something. If you're right with the Master and if you have a relationship with Jesus Christ, you're either going by rapture or you're going by death, one of the two. But you need to be praising God that he's fixed to take you out. See, death, remember he says, death, where is thy sting? Do you know that every day I live, that standing right here this morning preaching to you guys this morning, that I know in my spirit that when he's done with me, I'm out of here. I don't worry about it. The Apostle Paul didn't worry about it. When he was in prison about to be killed, he didn't worry about it. He done what God had told him. And I was sitting here on my knees this morning, and the Lord was dealing with me. He said, son, you're getting it. I had to blind Paul because Paul didn't get it. He thought he was doing the right thing, but he was way off base. And he said, it wasn't until I blinded him and he learned to follow me in the Spirit, he learned to hear me in the Spirit. It was then, read it yourself, that then Paul began to follow Christ because he was hearing and seeing in the Spirit, not in the flesh. I heard it as clear as I could this morning when he was showing me this right here. He said, son, here, Jesus was being prepared for the crucifixion, the darkest hour, the darkest time on earth at that time in history. And he said the earth is being prepared again for this time. Because this time, when the Son comes, and he comes in the clouds, and the church is taken out, I'm telling y'all that's watching right now, that don't know him, or maybe you think you do, but all your other things are more important, and you laugh and you scoff, the day is fixing to be here, and it's very close. If you think you're shaking your head going, man, the world's gone crazy now, oh, will there be some that'll come to Christ during that time? Yes. But you will suffer something. You will suffer like you can't even imagine suffering. Do you really want to go through that? Do you really? And see, here's the thing. The Word says, no man comes to the Father unless the Spirit is drawing you. And if you're not feeling anything, if you're not feeling that tap on the shoulder, if you're not feeling that tug in your gut and your spirit, if you're not feeling anything but, hey, baby, I'm going to go party and live it up, don't say you're saved because you're not. Because the Holy Spirit ought to be tearing your guts out right now. Because no man comes to the Father unless the Spirit draws him. So if you have got anything at all stirring in your spirit, you need to listen. You need to think about what I'm saying. You need to answer. Listen, May 6, 1991, I've shared my road to Damascus experience many, many, many times. But I still could have said no. I don't see how I could have said no. But I guess I could have still said, no, I don't want it, even after all that. I can't imagine that. And here's what the Lord really, this whole Trump thing, we need to get off of it. What if Trump loses? Here's the problem with that. And I'm not saying don't vote for Trump. I'm not saying don't be a Trump fan. I'm not saying that. But I am saying that you better watch making Trump your God. Because God is burning everything up that's not of Him. And here's the whole thing. If you read the Word and you know the Word, anytime God's children have begun to turn to other gods, it has not ended good, folks. Be very careful. Because if the Lord removes His hand and wills it, Trump will lose by a landslide. And if he chooses, the time is now. And here's what scares me. Here's what bothers me. It's what I've been hearing out in this world. And the people I hear, man, as soon as we get past this election, man, everything will go back to normal. No, it won't. When in your lifetime, when in your parents' lifetime or your grandparents' lifetime, do you remember God shutting the whole world down like this? I certainly don't know it. And I got books written in the 1800s. I don't say, yeah, plagues and all that. Yeah. But if you just stop and let the Lord minister to your spirit, you'll see this ain't about the United States. See, we all now want to say, well, it's all about the Democrats and the Republicans. Well, what about over in Israel? What about over in Iraq? What about in Australia? Read about what's going on there. See what's going on here? It's going on around the globe. And if you can't see the hand of God of what's happening, look, California is on fire from the bottom of California all the way up to Washington. Pay attention to what's going on in Washington. Pay attention to what's been going on in California. But these people are too blind to see it because God says, I will send a great delusion. They don't see it. And they're not going to see it because if God blinds them, they're blinded to it. But we already know, remember the rainbow? We already know how God says this, what's going to happen to this world. He's going to burn it up. You see, I see God's judgment. People don't like to talk about that. Church don't like to talk about that. I'm telling you, just like right here, right before Jesus was betrayed, and right before the time of his crucifixion, was the darkest time in this world's history. So you don't necessarily believe what I'm saying here. Well, turn your Bibles. Now we're going to get to James 5 this morning. 3 weeks, but we're going to James 5 because now when he showed me this, now James 5 makes perfect sense. Ever have God do that to you? Man, he speaks something to you, and it makes sense, but it's like, okay. And then he finishes the rest of the story, as Paul Harvey used to say, and it all makes perfect sense. Come on. James 5. We're going to start verse 1. warning to the rich. You know, it's funny through all this pandemic that all I keep hearing is people's money. Governor Abbott has just signed a deal, and it's funny this whole pandemic. The small business owners still got to wear masks, still got to stay closed and all that. But Jerry Jones, he's got a lot of money, a lot of influence. So all of a sudden, we can open up AT&T Stadium. We can open up Globe Life Park. We can open up all this stuff all of a sudden because that virus don't work there. Folks, I'm telling you, the virus is alive in the pits of hell. Virus is real. The pandemic is not. The pandemic is all Luciferian driven. Period. But the virus, I'm just going to go ahead and say it. I ain't going to worry about it. They believe that what I had in December was a COVID virus. What I've been told anyway. But you see, I'm not one that really accepts a lot of what doctor says unless God confirms that